Welcome back to the Bigwater podcast. I'm Ross Roberts and want to thank every one of you for joining us back yet here again. We're talking about fishing. We're talking about all kinds of craziness, different things. Wherever it goes, it goes. And I'm very fortunate today. We've got a guy that is a literally living legend in the fishing industry, but I'm happy to call him a personal friend. And that is one of the all-time leading money winners, Bruce Sampson. Now, he's a Minnesota guy, so we'll not hold that against him too much because we got a lot of guys that listen from Minnesota. But Bruce, we want to thank you for joining us.
No, I'm glad to be here, and I can pick on you.
Yeah, see, that's what a lot of people don't realize about Bruce, because I think there's two Bruces, and I don't mean you have like an alter ego, but you're kind of, to your friends behind closed doors, you're definitely one way, and I think if somebody was to run into you in a tackle shop or something, they're going to see a different Bruce. Is that fair?
That is very fair. There's the calm guy and the guy that picks on you.
And I get picked on a lot, and no one feels bad for me. I'm not sure why. But I can remember probably one of the first times, I think, just digging the heels in, was up at Saginaw Bay. You brought your motorhome up there. I remember that. And yep. I was fishing with Dave Hansen, because I traveled with Dave, all over the country. And he says to me, I think you better go help the bobber doctor out a little bit. Because, you're a smart dude. Folks at home, he was a real, and we'll talk about this as we move on, but he's a legit medical doctor, and we'll talk about that, kind of how things transpired from there. But you are a lone gun. Like, you kind of do your own thing. You're a lone wolf. Is that fair?
Yep.
So
that's it.
A lot of your stuff that you're going to do back home, rigging points or individual things. I call you the bobber doctor because, you've won a hell of a lot of money with a bobber, right?
Yes.
So,
yep.
But when you go use Great Lakes bobbers, AKA pointer boards, that's a whole different deal. And again, 20 some years ago, people knew a lot less. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have all these things, right? So this is a whole different game. And here I end up jumping in the boat with you in the middle of Saginaw Bay. Do you want to tell them what happened, or do you want, let's hear your version first. Let's hear your version.
Well, I had just started tour fishing instead of, that's different than tournament fishing. Tour fishing, you have to go across the United States. And I'd been very successful fishing the PWT and the RCL, but I picked local tournaments. And, Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin.
Local to you, not a local tournament. Local to you, right?
Yeah. And I had never been to the Great Lakes, and I had never used planer boards until the year before. I went to Lake Erie, I used planer boards, and I had no clue as I look back. It's a lot more complicated than just putting the boards out. So anyway, so I go to Saginaw Bay and I had this great idea this year. I didn't have an autopilot, but I thought I was using my kicker most of the time. So I thought, this new Vantage, I can go fast enough to troll with that. So I didn't put a kicker on. And so I get out there and it didn't work because you can't steer with a Vantage because it doesn't have a keel like a kicker does. So if you walk away, if you're going straight, you're going around in a circle immediately. And
it was a nightmare, just so you know. It was almost like a calamity hour, really, because we were trying to troll spinners at pretty slow speeds. To give a little insight.
But I look back, I'm very impressed, because what I did was I used drift socks and the main motor, which was a Mercury Optimax, and I was able to, with the different size drift socks, to get the speed I wanted, and the boat would go straight. And it actually worked. I think I got 11th in that tournament.
That is, you're an adapter. There's no doubt, and any good tournament fisherman is. But that's one of those adapters that you don't. Looking back, am I wrong? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's a tournament where you don't want to adapt that way because you weren't prepared. And I know you never want to be unprepared.
Right. Well, that's part of the secret of tour fishing, is being prepared. I do walleye classes with Johnny Candle, and he, gives an hour seminar how to prepare yourself when you go to new waters that you haven't been to before. what do it's complicated. I mean, it's a whole seminar from calling the bait stores, checking the fishery reports. I mean, just, learning the techniques that are best there. It's, you have to be prepared.
So let's bring it back and give somebody, why don't you give us a little background on, you're from North Dakota, and you are, you're retired now, of course, but a real deal medical doctor. So give people that don't know about Bruce Sampson a little bit of background on yourself.
Well, yeah, I'm from North Dakota, went to medical school, became a doctor, and it's a good job for me. Really liked it, really enjoyed it. And what I would do, I was divorced, raising my kids, so my kids were there, for 2 weeks at a time, and then 2 weeks with their mother. So I got to go fishing a lot. And what I would do is go fishing on my vacations. And then when I found out they had tournaments, well, I love competition. I always have. Competition just motivates me. And so when I found out that you could fish and have competition, I was hooked. And I got trained by a guy that was already self-trained in tournaments. A guy named Jerry Anderson taught me how to fish tournaments. I didn't understand at that time what weather did to fish, what sunshine did to fish, what waves did to fish, what time of the year did to fish, what water temperature did to fish. And he taught me all of that, and he also taught me how to win tournaments. He taught me to target big fish while you're pre-fishing. And so that, you can win a tournament in the middle of the boats by doing it better than them. But you can win more tournaments if you have fish that nobody else has. And so if you spend your time trying to target the largest fish, you may strike out at the tournament because you don't have the fish to catch a check. Big fish are really hard to target because Erie's different. You have lots of big fish, but most places don't have fishing like Lake Erie. And
we've got a different problem. We've got 150 million fish that are 3 to 4 pounds. So trying to get them not to bite and to get the big ones to bite, you know what I mean? Because there is a lot,
sure.
But proportionally, that's our problem. So.
Yeah, it's the same problem. You have to figure out and spend the time focusing on those big fish to know what works. And, that's what I've done. And I've learned that big fish love shallow water a lot. 2 feet, 3 feet of water. Fish them like bass guys.
Blows people's minds, doesn't it? Walleyes aren't supposed to be that
Say
shallow.
That again?
I said it blows people's minds. They don't think walleyes aren't, they're too spooky. They shouldn't be in that shallow water. But I think they go there because most people don't.
That could be. I just don't know why they're there, but they're there in a lot of systems. And they're easy to catch. They're big. There probably isn't a lot of them. They're probably in there feeding. I don't know because you can't count them. All I know is that in some systems, that's where the biggest fish are, and they're untapped. They're just not targeted. You can, an easy way to find out is ask the bass guys. Ask the bass guys if they're catching, quote, accidental walleyes. If they're catching walleyes, then you need to go shallow. Because they fish in 3 feet of water all the time.
Right. And I think, for people at home here that don't know you like I do, you said something that we kind of jumped over pretty quick, but it's very profound because I know you believe it. I mean, you truly in tournaments you never won an Angler of the Year, did you?
No.
Yeah.
I guess I did. Wait a minute, I did. I won 2 on the PWT when they had an East and West division. They called the top angler of the division. But when there's only 3 tournaments and you win one, it's easy to get the Angler of the Year.
But and the reason I ask that is because I would imagine that statistically it would be very difficult, for you to win Angler of the Year because you go for it. Like 3rd or 4th place, you just assume being in last place is 3rd or 4th with your mindset because you're there to win. And I don't think most anglers are too worried about cashing a check or getting Angler of the Year or average finish. You don't give a shit. Like you are going for it. And that's really very, very, I don't know another walleye guy that has that mentality, but that's probably why you've won more than just about anybody.
Yeah, the journey is a lot more fun, even when you strike out. I mean, when you strike out big. Okay, so you're fishing for big fish, and you don't get them the first day. Well, what chance do you have except to fish them again? Well, the pattern may have changed, and that's it. So I finished last place before, and I don't go home feeling terrible. I failed. That's all.
So let's go back to some of Jerry's stuff there. I mean, I understand that saying that you know how to win and doing it is two very different things. And like when Jerry kind of taught you about pre-fishing for the bigger fish, there's a whole lot going on, and I don't know that we could explain that for 6 hours or 6 days and still not really grasp that. But what are some things that people can do when they really try to, I mean, like we talked about with Johnny Candle, preparation. What are some other things that you do besides just targeting big fish in order to win?
Well, preparation. You have to be prepared. You can't go into a tournament and have something fail. Oh, here's an example. Okay, I remember I was fishing lead core over trees, near the top of trees. I had 8 lead core rods ready. I didn't have 8. I had 8 lead core reels ready. I didn't have 8 rods ready. I got an amateur in the boat on the second or third day, and he said by the end of the day, his pro was fishing with 2 rods because he'd lost the 2 of them. So he came to the tournament with 4, lost 2, and he was fishing with 2 by the end of the day. That's not being prepared. I learned one time. I remember in Fort Peck, Montana. Okay, we're fishing flooded trees, brush really. And, I got snagged during the week, so I had all kinds of spinners tied. I ran out of spinners in that tournament. Yeah, well, you taught me, and I ran out of spinners. And I was midday with my co-angler tying spinners. Talk about an embarrassment. I never ran out of spinners after that. I had so many spinners for every tournament. It was like, but it's, that's lack of preparation is what it is. Running out of bait, running out of bait in a tournament. Having a favorite lure and you lose 2 of them and you don't have any more. Those are really lack of preparation.
Yep, yeah, exactly. And organization is big for me because I carry a lot of stuff. I like to think I'm always prepared, but the problem is if you're not organized, then you can't find it when you need it.
Yeah, and I do that. I try to put my, I used to get a boat every year, and I don't anymore because I'm retired from that. But every boat, I try to put everything in the same spot. I do. Because we all know we put things in there that we hardly ever use, and you put it in the spring, and you may not need it until fall, and then where is it? But if you have it the same place every year, it sticks with you.
I just did an article for a major publication, and one of the things was in there, and items like 20 items to have in your boat, and one of them was a little voltmeter. And I posted that up, on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. And one of my guide clients made a comment on it, and he said, I remember when that voltmeter, that $5 voltmeter, saved our bacon because we had on the negative post on my cranking battery, it wasn't grounding. So we ended up putting it on the other post. But I've never heard of that even happening, and who would have thought to try that? But when I moved the testers on there, sitting in the middle of the lake, dead in the water, that fixed us. So I haven't used that voltmeter in 3 years since that happened, but that $5 deal saved our bacon, and those are things that you learn. Same thing with the tow rope. I'm not going to not carry a tow rope because I haven't needed it in 10 years. So, and you can walk that all the way down to crankbaits and stinger hooks and everything else, really, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a boat without a voltmeter in it. Yeah. I don't use it anymore. They make the boats better. It used to be you'd have connections break, and then you were trying to hunt it down where you lost the voltage, and the new boats, the way they wire them, I take my boat apart, and the way they wire them now is much better than it was 10 years ago.
Agreed. So let's back up a little bit for the guys that don't know your story. So you're in North Dakota originally. You go to college. You become a medical doctor. Was that your passion to be a doctor, or did you just think that, hey, that pays pretty good and you're going to get some pretty ladies, or what's the deal?
Well, I didn't think of those two things, but
maybe you aren't as smart as I thought you are. I hold you in high regard, but
I wasn't really thinking about the money. What I was thinking about is I needed to do something that I could do well, and I am a science guy. I'm not an English or literature guy. Those things are really hard for me, really hard. And math and science is really, really easy. So I went to college. I was either going to be an engineer or a doctor, and I don't even remember why I picked a physician. It just sounded good, and it really wasn't planned out. It's just who I am. I just at that time I was severe ADHD. Just got married. It was me planning is not the best on that. So anyway, I ended up doing that. I found out I loved it. It's really it's just perfect for me because it's really hard, and it takes a lot of time and it takes persistence. You have to, it's like going to med school is like having two jobs. That's all I considered it. It's two jobs. You go to school all day and then you study all night and you go to bed. People do that to support their family. So to me, it's like, why can't I do that to get the job I want?
So where did you go to medical school?
I went in North Dakota, then I got more training out in Oregon, and then I came back to Minnesota because I was getting a divorce, and that's where my kids were going to be, and I did not want to be. I wanted to be a father. I really wanted to be there with my kids, so that's why I ended up with them half the time. And so that's why I ended up in Minnesota. And then I found out, with fishing. I mean, I started fishing. I basically was a bank fisherman until I was about 30 years old because I couldn't afford a boat. And I learned a lot on how to fish small rivers. It's just current. And so I got a boat. I went in the lakes. I couldn't catch nothing. I read every book. I had all these books on how to catch fish, and I still didn't catch nothing because I didn't have the secret of somebody that knew that could put it all together for me. And that's when I met, Jerry Anderson, and he put it together for me. That the book knowledge is good, but it's not as good as having somebody that knows. It'd be like you, if I tell people if they want to learn how to pull boards to catch big fish, I tell them to go to Lake Erie and hire Ross, because there you can get your training from you.
Yeah, some things you just have to do. It's just like that day, and obviously I knew even at 17 or whatever I was, 16, 17 years old, like, Bruce gets it because you didn't know jack shit about planer boards, but after one day of doing that, you already had picked up on things, and I could see where you were trying to improve or think, why don't we do this? And you were trying to think ahead, and guys that are going to be successful at this have to play chess, not checkers. You've got to be thinking. You've got to be thinking ahead. You've got to know what's going to happen before it happens. And boards are like that, especially as you move them around so you can keep them in the water. They're like big bobbers, right? But
yeah, and I love when they go down under the water.
I don't. I like when they almost go under, because when they go under, it can be a bad deal. So many of those fish come off. But so anyhow, you stuck around Minnesota there, and when you hooked up with Jerry, and you guys ended up winning an MWC Championship together, didn't you, or was it?
Yeah, we did, and I think we won a MWC Championship. We won Angler of the Year, or they called it Team of the Year. We did it for 3 years. We got third at another championship. Won a couple tournaments. It was a good journey, and I learned how much I didn't like fishing some of the waters around the United States. I can remember fishing Spring Valley in a flood.
Oh.
And at that time, at the tournament, you couldn't fish outside the original boundary of the river. So it was flooded. There were no fish in the river.
They're all
I never had a bite. 7 days of fishing, I never had a bite.
Oof. And back in the day when you're talking, the MWC, that was the creme de la creme. That was the Super Bowl. You know, that was the deal. I don't think there was anything above that at that point. That was pre-PWT, right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, it was the beginning of fishing tournaments, and everybody that was really good at fishing thought, hey, this is where I want to go, and so you had a lot of. I mean, Al Linder even fished. I remember he fished one. It was just a funny story. I mean,
we got time.
You got time for it?
We got time for that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it was up in the Cisco Chain of Lakes in northern Wisconsin, and they had rusty crayfish had eaten everything. There was no cover. The main cover for the fish that were shallow was trees that fall in the lake. Oh. Well, anyway, Al was fishing with Tom Newstrom, and they apparently found fish in a stump field. And in the channel, there was a channel between two lakes, and in the channel, Bob Probst and Mike McCullen found fish in the channel in there.
Oh, God, I think I know where this is going.
Okay, so with the tournament, here they are, very famous people, fish anglers at that time. And the boats had to go through the channel to get to the other lake. By the end of the day, the whole field was there. I think, it was, it's bad, but at that time, there wasn't much,
sports.
I didn't think there was much ethics. Yeah, we had found fish another place, and but we heard about it afterwards that it was just anyway, their fish got destroyed because all the boats were there.
Right. Well, that happens to this day, and I don't know that the ethics have improved greatly at this point in the game either. But that is kind of funny because, like you said, those are two of the big name groups right there. I mean, Al's still relevant this many years later. But so anyhow, how many years did you do the MWC thing before you worked your way into the PWT?
Well, I did it for 3 years, and then I quit because I had to get back to raising my kids. I was gone too much. And so I did that. And then I think I did my first, a few years later, I did my first PWT. And then I started doing them. And I got very successful at it. I was fishing, waters that I knew, that was before, like I said, before I even knew about boards. And never used lead core, never used any, just was not a troller. When you're in Minnesota, with one line, there isn't many trollers. And so anyway, I did that. And what I did was I had an opportunity. My wife moved, I moved to a new job, and I was going to follow her there. So we sold the house and moved there, and we agreed that I could take off 7 months and do an adventure. I got to fish the entire PWT and the RCL, which became the FLW. So 9 tournaments, and I just so happened to won $370,000 that year. So you get a little delusional.
So is this when you moved to Minnetrista, the house that I was at? Yeah.
Yep. So I got a little, and after it was all done, I can still remember when when I won that $300,000 check. They were interviewing my wife, ex-wife now, in the audience, and it was funny. She was nervous and excited for me, and so he says, would he quit his job and go fishing if he won and won? She said, in a second. And of course, we didn't even talk about it. But anyway, we talked about it after that, and that's when I took fishing on as a career. What year was that? That was in 2002.
2002.
So I got 18 years as a career in fishing, and it's been good. A great adventure.
Well, I think the thing that maybe a lot of people don't know if they haven't paid attention, because I know I direct a lot of people your way to help them, because obviously you've been super successful as a tournament angler, but probably I think generally speaking, you're across the board more known for your business, which I don't think a lot of doctors transition into business well. It's kind of a known thing, you know what I mean? Like generally doctors are not good businessmen. They're not good with just stuff, but because you're just wired a different way, like you said. But with you and the high-tech fishing or Dr. Sonar thing, I mean, you took it to a new level. I mean, that really is what allowed you probably to make a living. Am I correct?
That is, and I got into that because I figured out, I just wasn't good with securing good sponsorships, and you can't make a living at fishing unless you got a lot of support. And what got me started is that it really was simple. Is that okay? It was just the beginning of new electronics. Before that was flashers. Then they come out with these LCD screens, and then Lawrence came out with a model called X15. It was like a software, like a computer. I remember turning it on in the spring, and all he did was use it as a graph and a map.
Now, let me stop you for 1 second, because I had one of those as well. Was the 350A the unit before, and that was the first chart plotter, right?
Yeah.
And then when the X15 came out, we had chartography.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and it had all these menus in it. It's basically almost like the same as Lowrance is now, or Humminbird, or Garmin. It had all these choices in there that had no clue what they meant. Because they made these things for Great Lakes anglers. They made them for offshore anglers. It wasn't just for somebody fishing a small lake. And I remember that winter I just said, I have to know. So I took a battery and got the manual out, and I went through everything in the manual on the unit. Everything. And when I was done, I said, I bet everybody would like to know what I just know. And that's when I made a DVD on it. Because we didn't know.
And again, fast forwarding 20 years and doing, I don't know how many seminars I've done, hundreds. And I think electronics is the only thing that people are really open to listening to be honest. And does that sound weird? But I mean, I can tell a guy, I've won tournaments, and I'm telling people, and they have it in their mind that what they're doing with lures or their favorite color or their favorite crankbait brand, that's what they're going to do. But I think a majority of the anglers know that they're not properly utilizing their electronics, or they know a fraction of what they would want to. Have you kind of found the same thing? I mean, me and you have done these schools, and we get people where they got the transducers upside down. I mean, do you remember some of the stuff we've done where we're like, people are blaming the manufacturer, and they say, they know I run Humminbird, so they say, hey man, this Lowrance is junk, I need to buy a new Humminbird. And I'll be like, no, you got your transducer mounted upside down. We've done these things, and it sounds crazy, but I don't know. The electronics thing was huge for you, and you took it to a new level. I mean, it's not exciting stuff. It's just not. It's kind of boring, but it's so necessary.
Yeah, and I learned how to explain it, and I think part of it was, as a doc, I had to learn how to explain technical things to people that they could understand. I've learned how to explain the technology of fishing electronics in a way that people can understand it. And and you have to talk different to different people. There's the guy that's the electrical engineer that wants to know more. There's a guy that has no computer skills that wants to know something. He doesn't even know how to use it. They don't even know that some people don't even know there's a micro SD card in a large slot.
And the funny thing is it's a pretty good business too, because the way electronics keep changing, you've got a constant supply of people having to relearn.
Yes.
Unlike other things that you do, it kind of a lot of what I do has really not changed a lot through the years. I mean, little things, but electronics. I mean, you just look at what we talked about. When I first started working on a guide boat, there was a Loran C. So people that are listening at home that don't know what that is, it basically was a series of radio towers, and it kind of cross-triangulated your point. Then we went to basic, simple GPS, where we didn't have a plotter, we just could punch numbers in, right? And then we got into like the 350A, which I think was the first plotter screen. So we could actually see like, here's our plot trail. We can swing back on fish, you know, hit a waypoint. And then, like you said, we start getting into chartography. And now, I mean, I've got two 12-inch hummingbirds on my boat, and usually half of them, at least, of those screens are set up with GPS because of like the Lake Master, you know, mapping is so important for me to know exactly where I'm at, and returning back and seeing exactly why I get, you know, bit certain places. Probably one of the coolest things, and I think it was like 2008 when I started running that Lake Master stuff, and this was before Hummingbird purchased them, and I knew about them because of you. You would put me in touch with some guys there, and they had the Great Lakes. They really didn't have us then. And when they first had that chip, I can remember, like it was yesterday, I loaded my waypoints onto a new unit and put that Lake Master chip in, I think it was 2008, into a Hummingbird. And all of my waypoints, like, because I have, just like you, I have them all categorized, you know, a certain way for big fish, for rocks, for this or that. And when that Lake Master mapping came up, which it's even way better than it is now, or you know, when it was in 2008, and all of my waypoints started to make sense. Things that were seemingly just in the middle of nowhere, with that Lake Master, which was deadly accurate 1 foot increments, I'm like, now I see like there's a little contour there. It's a micro contour. It's maybe a 6-inch, but when you're on a big mud base, 6 inches is a big deal. Those fish use that like a highway, as you know. And I mean, it was just that right there was a game changer. I mean, there's a lot of bass guys to this day that still run Hummingbird just so they can have Lake Master mapping.
You know, it brings me back. I can remember when they first started. I was just starting to get into computers and fishing because I found out that, you know, that you could see your waypoints on the computer. I was like, whoa. And Lake Master did not have any charting at that. They just were using like DNR maps. But even that was a major breakthrough at that time because you could put your waypoints on those DNR maps, which were like 10-foot contours. And they weren't even accurate, but they give you way more information. And that's kind of what got me going into the electronics. Was part of it was Lake Master, learning how to use that, put my waypoints in there, and you know, and then they evolved into, you know, mapping themselves, and you know, that changed. That's a game changer. You know, they just they do a really nice job of the way they display the maps. That's the key thing, is they really display them so that you can understand what's under the water.
I mean, I don't want to pick on anybody, so I won't say names, but some of the earlier chartography that I used, like they'd have circles or little contours or things, and come to find out, I think they just put them on there to make it look pretty because there wasn't really things going on there. And that Lake Master stuff, I mean, that is a game changer. I mean, if someone took that away from me, that's a hard pill to swallow.
It would be. You know, you talk about breakthroughs in electronics. You know, there's a lot of breakthroughs, and mapping was one of them because it shows you the spots on the lake. I mean, if you didn't have a map and you saw a bunch of boats and you fished next to them, if you're not a good fisherman, you wouldn't understand why they're there. But if you have the map, it's like, oh, well, look at that. They're on a big fat point that makes a bend.
Well, and as good as that is, you know, there's not Lake Master like, you know, some of the small lakes like you live on. The little lake you live on, your little crappie lake there. Does Lake Master available on that, or?
Oh yeah, they mapped it. They've actually mapped it twice. They went out and mapped it again, and the first map was done, you know, years ago, and they just redid it, and it wasn't that good. They missed things. They went out there and they got everything. You know, I've mapped the lake myself with the auto chart.
Well, that's where I'm going. Is
yeah, and their map is like, I don't need my auto chart anymore because their map is so good.
Well, and that's exactly where I was going with this. I've got friends that live on small lakes, you know, that we've shot a crappie show and different things like that on, and you can auto chart live with Hummingbird, and there's other units and things that are available now to do that. But you can make your own map of literally a farm pond. I mean, they've even got it for the ice unit.
You know, I've been doing my own mapping before AutoChart, before any of that.
Is this going back to the Warren partnership?
Well, what the AutoChart was called a Dr. Depth. And it was the software that I put on a computer that was sunlight viewable, and I put it in a boat, and I could do mapping just like AutoChart does today. And I was doing that for, I don't know, 5 years before AutoChart came out.
I know, because I was privy to some of that information.
Yeah, it is really, I've mapped it all. Garmin has mapping. Lowrance has mapping. I don't know if Raymarine does, but I do. I like the way the AutoChart does the color. So that's the and the ease of it. You just pick a color scheme and you're done.
Yeah, I mean, electronics are it's crazy, but I think that the other part is like, that one network system or one boat network system that Humminbird has is the trolling motor stuff. Even though I'm a board guy primarily, I fish big waters, you're generally fishing smaller waters, and you're more of a bobber guy or jig rig guy, is the trolling motor, spot lock, autopilot. I mean, that has come so far. I mean, that Ultrex motor is kind of the ultimate now, whether you're a bass guy in a river or a walleye guy trolling.
That is, I don't have one. If I was a bass guy, or if I was fishing a river, I definitely would have an Ultrex. You have to be in the front of the boat when you fish rivers, or if you fish bass. You just, there's no other way. I don't need to be right now, but
yeah, I'm flopping back and forth because I really like the Altera. The auto deploying and everything is really nice, and some other different features that I really like for open water fishing. But I've got an Ultrex with 360 on it, because now, side imaging was huge. Humminbird came out with that, whatever year it was. That was a game changer in itself. But now this 360, I don't know if you've used that much. It is insane. It's almost like video gaming, where you know what's going to happen before it happens.
I don't have one yet, and I'm considering it now that they have the new Mega, which is, gives you a clearer picture with the 360 than the old one.
It's pretty crazy.
You speak about autopilots. It's been around so long. It's just considered normal. But for trolling, before there was autopilot, it was way harder. And I have two autopilots on my boat. I have one in the kicker and one in the front. So I'm a believer in autopilot.
I can remember you having that TR1, I think it was, back 20 years ago.
Yep. I learned, it just allowed me to, you get hands-free. If you don't have autopilot, nobody understands that now because everybody has autopilot. But at one time, wasn't available. And, when you have a fish on, the boat doesn't steer straight. It wants to go crooked, and it's nice to have hands-free while you net and handle fish.
Yeah, no matter how good you are, like I'm pretty wiry still, I'm pretty good at what I do, but when you bend down to unhook something or somebody tangles something, it only takes 2 seconds to put everything in a tailspin. And those waves push you. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are or how good you are, you need that extra pair of eyes and hands, which is what an autopilot does. And like you said, having two is, some people would consider that overkill, but I think compared to the days I first started fishing with you on Saginaw Bay where you didn't have a kicker, it's probably not overkill.
It's not.
It's definitely not overkill.
Especially if you're doing a little bit side wind, contour line trolling, like trolling a contour, say an 18-foot contour. You can do it with side wind with two autopilots.
So, the one thing that I think we got to bring out, because it takes a lot to impress you, I'll just say that. Like, you don't even crack a smile, even though I can get it out of you, because I know there's things I probably can't say that I don't want, permanently recorded that I would tell you to smile. Those are the things we have to keep out there. But the one thing that you just absolutely are enamored with, was just so funny, because I hold you in high regard, you're a super smart guy, is you catching your own chubs or your own bait. Like, you are like a kid in a candy store with that. I mean, you've called me multiple times, I gotta call you back, I'm catching chubs, or hey, I'm going to catch chubs tomorrow. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm pretty sure you can go afford to buy your own chubs or whatever, right? But that's not really, I mean, what is this whole minnow gathering catching thing for you?
You can't buy your chubs you want because you can't get the right size. You know, you have to have all different sizes, and they're better fresh. You know what the best chub is? If you catch it in the morning, you put it in the water in the lake in the afternoon. They're wild. And the reason you catch chubs is that chubs are active. Active minnows make fish bite. If it's just, you know, I watch people when I fish chubs. It's a dirty secret, but it's expensive. But the guy that's catching the most fish seems to, it's different all the time. You know why? Because he's putting a fresh chub on.
So they're just swimming around actively like a nut job.
Yeah. That's like on the Mississippi River, they use a lot of willow cats. If you ever see a willow cat swim in the water, it's amazing. He makes a chub look like he's lazy. It's you know, and I catch my own chubs because then I have a supply. I mean, I have my own commercial tank that chills the water in my backyard.
I love it.
And because you can't keep them alive unless they're in cold water. They get diseases on them. You know, that's why they have cold water at the bait stores. You know, if they've been in there a while, you get a chub, they start getting white on their noses. That's just a disease. They don't catch fish as good.
So are you going to give us some down secrets? Like, how are you catching these chubs?
Just with a bobber and a hook.
There you go, the damn bobber again.
Yeah, well, whatever works the best. It's really simple, Ross.
Is it like a little fly, or what are you doing? A little piece of worm, or?
No, just a piece of worm. You know, that works great. You know, wax worms work, maggots work, worms work. Night crawlers don't work good. They steal them off. They're too big.
Interesting.
And it's you know, you just got to find a creek that has chubs in it, and then you got to be careful. You can't be in a creek that has invasive species in it. So you got to know which creeks you're supposed to be in.
So how? I know you've got a chilled commercial deal. Most of us are not going to have a chilled commercial tank in our backyard. But how long do you feel that you can keep these things?
Yeah, you can keep. If the water's cold, you can keep them for 6 weeks easy.
6 weeks.
If the water's cold, and it's got to be 55.
Before you hang it up, I think you're going to have to take me on a creek chub hunting mission.
It is just as fun as fishing.
Oh, I know you're enamored with it. I know that.
And I'll take you, and then I'll catch more chubs, and that'll frustrate you, and then you'll have to learn.
So let's talk about the biggest mistakes you have with Sonar, because I can't imagine having Dr. Sonar, aka High Tech Fishing, on and not talking more about some Sonar a little bit. What are the biggest mistakes that you see? I know the ones that I see with guys, or the questions that, social media now, I'm sure you get a lot of direct messages and private messages and things asking you. And a lot of people have the exact same problem, don't they?
I think that the two things that people need to get better at, from my experience with them, is determining the size of the fish. I see a lot of people fishing fish that are too small. And it's not easy to tell size of fish because they change with depth range. If you have a depth range of 20 or a depth range of 50, the fish are not the same size. In shallow water, the fish look huge. Deep water, the fish look small. Your sensitivity can affect it. If you turn your sensitivity down too low, the fish look really small. And the other thing that I find that with people that makes mistakes with sonar is that, they find these fish and they don't fish them. They just keep on going.
Let's back up 1 second, because I remember one thing, again, advantage that I have is me and you have taught schools together at retail places. We've done private events together. And when you do the little trick where you show the people, and these are generally with slides, not on the water where I've been with you, but you put like a 6-inch minnow. It was probably one of your chubs, your little pet chubs. And you put it down there below the thing, and you show them. And you've got stuff on your website right now on High Tech Fishing and Dr. Sonar stuff where here's your sinker, and you label the stuff on your Facebook page. You can see this. Like, here's a sinker. We know what this is. This is a sinker. We know that this is a 6-inch chub, and here's what it looks like. So if you think that that's a 6-pound walleye, you're nuts, right? Because here we know we have a control on that.
And we also have walleyes right below it, because I lift the chub up and the walleyes will come up, so you can see what the walleye looks like comparison to the minnow at that depth.
And I guess I probably should have asked for, I'm going to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. Probably for the last 20 years, I've used your tennis ball thing in my seminars, where you remember the 18-inch, me and you, because we did a seminar together a long time ago, and you had a slide where the tennis ball was tethered 18 inches above. Well, it turns out it was in your pool.
Yeah.
And your wife was taking, the transducer across, and you were basically showing how the fish mark as you move through the cone, and that in a controlled environment. And I can remember every time that we did that together, someone would be like, "No, that's on bottom," or "This is here," and you're like, "No, it's 18 inches because we have a control." But it's changing as that cone moves, whether it's the inside or directly underneath the boat. I don't know if there's any explanation you can give, kind of just talking out loud on that, but that's a big one that people don't understand. Is some of these fish that skedaddle to the edge of the screen, and you're not fully picking them up.
Yep. I just posted a thing on my Facebook page about what a school of crappies look like when they're on the edge of the cone. All they did was little tiny black arches or blue arches, and then, and my screen shows what the school of crappies look like when you drive right over top of them. They got color in them, yellow and red. But yeah, it's hard to explain that. But all a transducer does is tell you the distance of the fish from the transducer. The distance of any target from the transducer, because it just measures the sound as it goes through the water.
And I guess I interrupted you there in the other one, but you brought up and explained this to me, the people drive by fish. Now, it sounds pretty simple on surface value, but give me your explanation on that.
All right. Okay, so you've been fishing for a while, and you finally see really nice fish. Too many people, they may start fishing and they just keep on going for another 100 yards, and they haven't seen fish for a while that size. I teach them. We teach them at these walleye schools. Put a waypoint on those fish, turn around, and go right back to them. Now, the easiest way to do it is like with your spot lock. Put a waypoint on, tell it the spot lock on the waypoint. Bingo. That's easy. But, I use but you just need to go back. Those fish are moving, okay? Usually I'm fishing for walleyes at the walleye school. Walleyes are usually moving. If they're in a pile of boulders and there's one big boulder that they want to live around, they may swim around that, so they're going to be close. But they're usually moving, and so seconds count. When you mark those fish, you want to be fishing them in 1 second,
right?
Or as close to that you can. And we teach them that. I always remember, I've had a couple of guys that go, "We graduated. We caught the fish we saw." And if you haven't got good boat control, just throw a buoy out.
It's adult video gaming. See them, catch them.
Yeah.
Another big one that I'd be interested to hear your take on it, but is, the powering of the units. When we talk about those early units, like the 350A or an X15, those things were maybe pulling an amp. Now some of these newer units are pulling 3 to 6 amps, and I see it all the time with guys where their wiring is too small, if they're extending it out to a distribution panel or to the battery.
Yep.
I personally run all my stuff directly to the battery using 12 gauge wire because I don't have that far to go. But 12 gauge is about the minimum that I would use, because I've watched the ampage drop. You can see it on your screen if you use a voltage overlay. And making sure that it's fused properly and heat shrink and all these things, and also to just get down to the battery, not having a battery that can power that throughout a day. People are still working with those old units with their infrastructure, the way that they're wiring, and it doesn't work, does it?
No. You know, I mean, I do a little overkill, but right now, what I do is I wire 8-gauge wire from the battery, a separate battery for electronics, one battery for the main motor, my Verado, separate battery for my electronics. I run it to it's called a Blue Sea fuse panel. It's just a higher quality fuse panel. I mean, you're going to pay $40 for it, or you know.
I've got them myself.
Yeah, and then so I run the 8-gauge to that, and then I run all my electronics off of that. And what I've noticed is I get much less voltage drop. You know, when you know, on the units, all the units can read the voltage. And so you put it on, so I look at it on my units and I can see how much voltage drop. It just doesn't drop as much when you do it that way.
Agreed. And I'd be interested to hear what your take, or if you have some places on your website we can direct people for this, because I know I put videos out all the time. I got another one getting ready to drop on this, is transducer placement. People see my screenshots. You know, people love screenshots, don't they? I mean, it's just, you put those on social media and they just love them. And you do a lot with that with the Dr. Sonar stuff and high-tech fishing. We're showing them, you know, you're interpreting what it is, because you know, and some of the stuff that you guys that Bruce has, it'll accompany it with an AquaView thing. So it's not him guessing, you're actually seeing an AquaView and then the 2D or the side imaging or whatever it is. So we know for sure, as much as we can, that is what it is. And, you know, the transducer placement, people watch these images that I put up and they're like, my hummingbird doesn't do what yours is doing. I need to buy a hummingbird because my Lowrance won't mark like your hummingbird is. And 90% of the time it's where that transducer is, because they're not allowing themselves to have a good signal no matter what. And I know you see that too. We've had it in the schools. We've had that a lot in the schools we've done together.
I do that at the schools. You know, you go and put their boat on a trailer and you show them how to adjust their transducer. You know, it could be as simple as too low or too high. You know, well, either way doesn't work well.
So, do you have anything out there that people can see? Because again, you know, I run a Ranger, fiberglass boat, and I put it down, you know, way down below the step. Now you're a Crestliner, you know, you've got an aluminum boat and you're worried about rivet lines and strakes and all that different stuff. And that's a totally different set of things you have to worry about compared to me. Do you have anything on your website that kind of shows that installation or the difference between that?
You know, I don't think I do. I think I put it in all my, you know, my DVDs and Hummingbird Lowrance, but I don't think I don't think I've done that. I probably should. It's a good thing. You make a good point. You have a glass boat. I have a welded boat. You don't have rivets. Rivets are really a problem for getting high-speed reading, because you're going to always have some turbulence. There's a row of rivets on every rivet boat that I know that sits right in front of that transducer. So you just have to accept that if you have a riveted boat, you're not going to get as good high-speed readings as you do with fiberglass or a welded boat. It's just the way it is.
Unfortunately true.
So, and high-speed readings are really important. You know, I mean, I think Dave Hansen taught me how to read a flasher at high speed, and it worked. For some reason, you drive over a school of fish wide open, and you can, or not wide open, say 20 miles an hour, and you can see this fish. You slow down and go through them slow, and they disappear. And that's sometimes the only way to find them.
Oh, that's probably, I mean, Dave taught me a lot of stuff, but him and Roach both taught me about that, how to really read a flasher, you know, and again, now with our units, there's no reason to use a flasher, of course, but 25 years ago, I was finding those fish at high speed and eliminating water at just a rapid pace, and it's 100% due to Gary and Dave for sure, but the thing I think that I learned in addition to that, once I located those fish, were when you do slow down, you're marking those fish that are down where the cone's wider and they're less spooked. But a lot of times there was quite a bit more fish up higher, is what I learned, because I saw them at speed, but those weren't marking at a fishing speed. So most guys were fishing too deep, and those fish were less active, or maybe not even as many fish.
Yeah, and the cone is narrower, so if you see more fish shallow, there's a lot more fish than you think. Than if you're picking them up at 30 feet or at 15 feet. It's like the cone's twice as wide.
So give me one more really good tip that you think that most anglers don't pay attention to, or the things that you see in the schools that you've done that you want to get out there.
On maps, when people are trying to navigate a safe trail that they made, they don't zoom in far enough. And they can be 100 feet off or 50 feet off that trail and look like they're right on top of the trail when they're driving through a dangerous area. I've seen that many times. They just, they just don't zoom in.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous. They made their waypoints on the safe channel, and then they don't zoom in.
100% agree, and for a multitude of other reasons that are along that same line. That's why I generally have a 12-inch Helix in full GPS mode, because the other thing that I've noticed is, like with the Lake Master mapping, or any mapping really, it kind of has a different perspective depending on how zoomed in or zoomed out you are. So you'll actually, it's basically like a zip drive really, where you're going to see more information if you have it zoomed in farther. And you're going to see truly, like you said, how you are in relation to a hump, a shoal, a channel, whatever it may be. So,
the advantage of having big screens, it's not just because it's cool. It's just you get more information. Trying to see a map on 1/4 of a screen versus using the whole screen. So it's a huge advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I realize everybody has different budgets and space in their boat and things like that, but if you use a large screen, I'm going to call them HD units, but like on the Humminbird stuff on my Helix units, they are so amazing. Having that on 12 inches is kind of like going and watching TV, the football game at home, on an old school TV versus a new flat screen with HD TV, and you can't go back. Once you use that, you're spoiled for life.
You're spoiled because most people don't have enough room for two 12-inch screens. It takes a lot of room.
I actually spent 9 hours building a custom bracket so that I could get two that were in front of me. It's easy sometimes to put two units on a boat, but to have it look good. But for me, I really want those front and center, because the same reason about the flasher deal. The problem I had with the flasher deal is it's not real safe riding in 4-foot waves and staring at a flasher. and now I've got those two 12-inch Helixes right in front of me. They're not blocking my vision, but I don't have to look away. I can keep my eyes on the prize and pay attention to driving, but then also just glance, and that's a huge thing. On the flasher, if you didn't see it right away, it was gone. Where I've got that nice memory, so I can miss 5-10 seconds and still see where those fish were at. Heck, you can record them if you want.
Yeah.
I know you do that quite a bit, but.
Oh, I've recorded so much, it just helps with providing information for teaching. I've got so many recordings that I have to get extra hard drives.
I'm thinking, it's been a while since we fished together, and I'm thinking I might go give you, some board lessons if you were to take me, minnow hunting, is what I'm saying.
That's the deal. I'm in.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I know we'll have to do one of these again for sure, because we have just barely touched the knowledge that you have with electronics and fishing. For those of you that don't know, Bruce, if you look up his resume, has been there, done that, won it all, and is a straight shooter, and absolutely has focused the last roughly 18 years of his career with education, and specifically in regards to sonar. So go check him out with the Dr. Sonar stuff at hightechfishing.com. There is just an immense amount of information that you can find with him that's out there, and also the DVDs that we've done. We've done one on trolling together, which I think is still available, and he's got DVDs for each individual specific thing. Whether you own a Helix 7 or you own another brand, he has a video out there that will show you everything from setup to using to on the water. So, Bruce, I want to thank you a lot for taking time. I know you don't do these things a lot anymore, and it's good to see you. It's been a little while.
Yes, and it'll be fun to teach you minnow hunting.
I definitely look forward to that. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in again. Make sure you go to bigwaterfishing.com. Look at us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, just about all that stuff. The Bigwater Podcast, of course, bigwaterfishing.com. Go there, check it out. We'll have lots of stuff. Thanks again, Bruce. We're out.